Good evening. I'm Mark Lawson, president of Morningstar Music Publishers, and this is the opening session of our National Conference on Sacred Music. Sorry for joining you late. We're having a few technical glitches, which is obviously to be expected in a virtual conference. I think you can't have a virtual conference without some technical glitches. We are joined tonight by Zeb Heiben, who is the director of music at Duke University Chapel. And we were to be in Duke University Chapel tonight, but obviously COVID has had other things in mind for us. So we're going to have a conversation about what you're about to hear. And we just want to acknowledge that obviously that today was quite an unusual day in our country. And Zeb and I were talking about the fact that sometimes we don't know what's going to be going on, but the liturgy often will allow room for many kinds of interpretations. And so Zeb will talk about that a little bit more later. So Zeb, tell us a little bit about the program tonight and about putting it together.
Sure. The liturgy that we've prepared for this evening from Duke Chapel is a pastiche of newly recorded prayers and readings and choral anthems and hymns from previous worship services that have been held in the chapel. So when you see large crowds filling our pews, that was not recent, and our communications team has done a really excellent job of indicating when things were recorded. You'll see pieces from the Advent, Christmas, Epiphany seasons woven together in what is hopefully a meaningful worship narrative. That even though it's primarily celebratory, because this is a service for Epiphany after all, it also starts in the place of Isaiah 60. For behold, darkness shall cover the earth and thick darkness the peoples, and kind of takes us through that Advent, Christmas, Epiphany journey. So I think it does still speak even in a challenging day like today.
Mm-hmm. Tell us about the program at Duke and some of the people involved, and kind of maybe some about what you've been experiencing.
Sure. Duke Chapel is contrary to what many folks think, because they think of Duke Divinity School as a Methodist institution. Duke Chapel is an intentionally ecumenical worship center. We are the religious heart of Duke University, the convener of all of the religious life groups that function at Duke Chapel, which include both Christian groups and other world faiths. Our staff of clergy and administrators and musicians does a Sunday morning service year-round, our sort of main liturgy, and also a service of choral evensong on Sunday afternoons during term time, and a service of choral vespers on Thursday evening during term time. So in a normal January, we would be having three main liturgies per week that the chapel staff is responsible for. And each of those is led by one of our three chapel choirs. The Duke Chapel Choir is kind of the longest established ensemble that sings on Sunday mornings that I conduct. The Vespers Ensemble focuses on early music, and they're led by Dr. Philip Cave, our associate conductor for chapel music. They lead the Thursday service. And the Evensong Singers is our newest choir, established about 6 years ago. And they're conducted by Christopher Jacobson, our chapel organist. And they lead, of course, Sunday afternoon Evensong. And in tonight's service, you'll get to hear all three of those choirs sing both individually and together in a sort of an imitation of what we would have done live had we been together in Duke Chapel.
Mm-hmm. And so we will get to see a little bit of the chapel tonight, since we've got some pre-recorded material, correct?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, some of the anthems that we used are borrowed from a Christmas program that we produced for CBS television last year. And those cameramen were really excited to work in such a beautiful space. So there's a lot of sort of glamour shots of the windows and the organs and the space itself. It turned out quite well, I think.
That's great. That's great. So you've obviously been doing things differently during this time of COVID. I know you've made several virtual presentations. Has that been your main way of producing video?
Yeah, we've done sort of a kind of a three-pronged approach. We've kept our Sunday morning services live. As a matter of fact, this is only maybe the third or fourth service that we've put together from previous recordings and then aired as a premiere. I know lots of churches have been going that route. That's one of the ways that my wife's church is functioning. But for us, we decided that we would do Sunday mornings as a live service with just a very small crew. So you have a couple of presiders, the preacher, and a small handful of musicians, all distanced, all masked, except when the individual who is speaking or singing, will remove the mask. And we're blessed with such a large chancel that it's easy for us to be very, very distanced, even though it doesn't always look that way on camera because of the camera angles.
Mhm.
So we've had the live services going on Sunday mornings. Then we've shown rebroadcasts of our Evensong and Vesper services from previous years that my colleagues on the music staff kind of hand select, and they write some worship notes describing what will be heard in the service that are new. And those two streams kind of keep going. But then to get our choirs involved, to keep them engaged, we've been meeting over Zoom and doing some of these virtual choir projects that we're all digging into in these days. And we drop those into our live Sunday morning service as an anthem whenever we have them ready and ready to go.
Sure, sure. Well, one of the things that's been unique about our National Conference on Sacred Music is the fact that not only is it a cooperative effort among three publishers, Augsburg Fortress, Morningstar, and Hinshaw, it's also a cooperative effort with the Fellowship of United Methodists and Music Worship Arts Group, the Presbyterian Association of Musicians, and the Association of Lutheran Church Musicians. And so we have people attending this conference from all those different denominations, plus others as well. You are kind of unique in the fact that you have served in Lutheran, Methodist, and Presbyterian situations. Tell us a little about the different churches you've been involved in and how that maybe has helped you at Duke.
Sure. Well, I'm a lifelong Lutheran, grew up in an old ALC, American Lutheran Church congregation that later became part of the ELCA, and went to seminary in the Master of Sacred Music program at Luther Seminary and St. Olaf College when that program was still up and running under the leadership of Paul Westermeyer and John Ferguson and Anton Armstrong. And it wasn't until graduate school at Michigan State University that I started serving in a non-Lutheran context. First Presbyterian Church in downtown Lansing, right across from the state capitol. I learned a lot in that context. There's an old, is it a Garrison Keillor line? Everybody's Lutheran, even atheists. It's a Lutheran God they don't believe in. We tend to get in our own kind of group and not always remember that many other parts of the church do things differently and that no one expression is more valid than any other. So living and working with Presbyterians, both at First Pres Lansing and then at Muskingum University, a Presbyterian college where I used to teach, was really helpful. And then the last 2 years before I came to Duke, I served Trinity United Methodist Church in downtown Columbus. And all of those experiences were really formative for me and helped me learn kind of the different approaches to worship, but also the heart songs of those different traditions, the genres of hymnody especially that matter most to them. And then coming to Duke, which is a really diverse place in every sense of that word, those experiences, that formation has been really useful.
And so probably in each of those experiences, I think the Epiphany service takes on a different connotation in a way. I know that many churches celebrate Epiphany on Sunday, even though it falls other places in the week. And then some hold on to the tradition of having it on Epiphany Day. What have you experienced about that tradition?
Exactly that kind of variety that you just described, Mark, has been my experience. I'm you're sort of a typical church musician type, and I teach at the Divinity School. I teach classes in church music and hymnody, and probably later on I'll do some worship teaching. I would love it if everybody kept the 12 days of Christmas and had themselves a little party on 12th night and did an Epiphany service and a home blessing perhaps on January 6th. But that's not always practical, I think, in every congregational setting, and it's not everybody's tradition. And what I think is valuable and interesting to keep in mind is that the liturgical calendar, the patterns of worship the church has observed, have always evolved over time. Epiphany used to historically observed three events, right? The adoration of the Magi, the baptism of Jesus, and Christ's first public miracle, turning water into wine at Cana. And there's even some texts, tribus miraculous, I can't remember the Latin phrase, but texts, liturgical texts that celebrate those three epiphanies, and they were all celebrated together on January 6th. Well, for most of us in most denominations, we separate those now. You have Epiphany, then you do the baptism of Jesus, then you do, depending on the lectionary year, Jesus changing water into wine, maybe the following Sunday, or Jesus calling the disciples, or other stories of Epiphany, stories of revelation. So already in the lectionary, we break apart the three kind of traditional epiphanies into successive Sundays. So I think, it's a pastoral decision. Musicians often don't get to make the call on that, which may be a good thing. I mean, we have to work together, and for some places it's just hard, I think, to get folks, especially maybe in a small parish or a rural parish, hard to get them together on a weekday evening.
And the other thing is, so much of the music has to be congregational because most choirs don't have the time to prepare
Choirs aren't back yet.
that much at that point. And so it either has to be very easy for the choir or it tends to be congregational. So
yeah, the normal pattern at Duke Chapel in a normal year, at least for the last several years, has been to observe Epiphany on the Sunday closest to it. And then it is a lot of congregational hymnody. We try to have some sort of a guest ensemble because our choirs aren't even here to rehearse. And then we'll often have a procession with some of the children from the Sunday school, sort of a king's procession, to We Three Kings or something like that, as part of one of the opening or closing hymns. So we very often will observe on a Sunday and make some of those adaptations. This year, the pastor who preached last Sunday really wanted to use the John 1 gospel because we hadn't used it on Christmas Eve because of only doing one service. So we did Christmas 2, and we had this NCSM service on Epiphany itself, which worked out really well. You don't always have to do everything the same way twice either, which is kind of a nice thing for us to remember.
It is. Well, let me talk a minute about some of the things for NCSM this year, and then we'll close, and then we'll switch. And what you will need to do is you can use the YouTube link that is in the description to go to watch the Duke service, or you can also go to the Duke YouTube page and find the service there. We are so happy that over 1,000 people have signed up this year for NCSM. And so we hope that what we have for you is of real meaning and will help you in your journey and in your days these days of worship during COVID. Each morning, we will start with a live morning coffee. And tomorrow morning, we'll feature all the publishers as well as representatives from FUMWA, ALCM, and PAM to discuss a little bit more about some of the offerings that will be taking place in the next 2 days, and also about the work that they're doing. They're all doing such wonderful work during this time to help provide tools for all their members. And then on Friday morning, we're going to have special guests from the past, some clinicians that have been a part of our program in the past. So we'll have Anton Armstrong and Eric Nelson, David Cherwin, Tim Waugh, and Mel Bringle. All will be there for a conversation. And what we're hoping on Friday to do is to look a little bit toward the time of when we start coming back. I think we're all hopeful that the vaccines that are now being used will help us to be able to start thinking about actually having choirs in person and worship in person again. And so maybe it's time to start thinking about what we want that to be. And so that's part of what that conversation is going to be like. Each day, we're also going to be adding workshops, reading sessions to the schedule, on the web page, and those will be available all the way to the end of January for you to view. And we just hope that what we've provided is of help. That's our main goal here this year. And so be sure and write us, be sure and let us know if there's ways that we can be helpful. And we hope that it will be of use to you. Tomorrow morning, Zeb is going to join us as well, and we can maybe talk about the service and see if there are any questions that we have. So thank you, Zeb, for your gift, and for Duke University's participation in this. And we're looking forward to viewing the service.
We're so pleased to be involved this year. Blessings to all, and I do hope that you enjoy and are blessed by the worship experience we've created for tonight.
And I should probably add that we are also tentatively scheduling to come back to Duke next year, that we're hoping that we can do that. We've all got our fingers crossed and still have some work to do to make this possible, but we're looking forward to that actually being a person next year in the chapel. So you can imagine each person sitting in the pews there as we see this tonight.
That's right. That's right. We are as well, really hoping that it works to be together in real life, IRL, next year.
I like that, IRL. Very good. Very good. Well, thank you. And we will sign off and enjoy the program.
Thank you. Enjoy worship, everyone.
Right. Thank you, Zeb.